Over the last 30 years, politics have been kinda bad. Debt ceiling hostages, awkward and intense Thanksgiving dinners, presidents calling their opponents the devil every day, multiple assassinations. I could go on. And this isn't gonna be a video pointing fingers, blaming the MAGA Republicans for ruining politics or the woke Democrats for ruining politics. Instead, I'm gonna explain the role that the incentive structures of our politics have played in leading our politicians towards clashing, polarization, yelling, competition, and a lack of cooperation. Now stay with me in this video as I explain in depth exactly how this incentive structure works and how it plays out in real life. The incentive here is pretty simple. When you have a president's bill trying to be passed in Congress, the minority party wins if this bill does not pass. And if it does pass, that minority party loses. See, Republicans love when this happens to a Democratic president bill, and vice versa. And the reason for this is pretty simple. A lot of the electorate is not super polarized and partisan, and instead they just look at what happens and what the president accomplishes. If there's a Democratic president who is passing legislation through the Congress, that's going to be seen as effective governance. But if they can't get anything done, they got no bills passing, the debt ceiling crisis is happening, that's going to be seen as bad governance, and that's going to be held against them. Even if they don't have a lot of influence over whether or not bills pass or don't, is what the public perceives. And so it's in the minority party's self-interest to never negotiate or cut deals. Because what message is that sending to the public? Congress is doing fine. We're passing laws that both parties sponsor. A majority of Congress thinks this is good, 2/3 sometimes. Okay, so then we should just keep the Democrats back in power, the public says to the Republicans. Oh no, you shouldn't do that, they say back. Well, why not? Because we'll make different things happen. That just doesn't ring the same. Say the Republicans in the Senate come to a negotiation with the Democrats that leads to a universal healthcare plan being passed. They negotiated to add in that obese and overweight people have to pay more than physically fit people, that private insurance still gets to play a huge role, and that there's no individual mandate. Mitch McConnell stands in front of the camera and says, whether or not we agree with Kamala Harris on many things, we are glad to say that we have worked together with Democrats and Kamala Harris in Congress to pass a bipartisan bill. It's going to solve an issue that Americans have debated on for decades. Go Republicans 2028. I mean, I don't know about you, that just don't seem like the best take to me. You're giving legitimacy to the opposing party. Why should the American public vote her out of office if the opposition is complimenting her, working with her, and getting things done? If the two parties are creating bipartisan legislation that they both agree on, then what is the point in making a change and turning the presidential office the other color? This is why the politics of the Republican and Democratic Party are only partially based off of beliefs and morals, and just as much based off of whatever the current president says and agrees with. Democrats were hugely against surveillance, George W. Bush, but now Republicans are the ones that mostly talk about removing these surveillance features, and Democrats are mostly the ones in favor of keeping surveillance. This may seem like cynicism, but it's more like the natural human tendency to make complex reasoning and logic chains to justify whatever is currently beneficial for their circumstance, even if they actually agree with what the opposition's doing. This is why every single thing in our culture has become politicized. Every policy, every person. It's emotional, destabilizing, and stressful. Overall not good, but what you gonna do? It's how the system's set up. But I never want to be a downer. So what can we actually do in this situation to try to fix this problem? Presidents can stop voicing their opinions on things that haven't been politicized yet, as that's going to create politics and partisanship around a topic which there could have been bipartisan agreement on without much trouble. Because as soon as a president voices an opinion on an issue, it becomes a political issue. Like right now, let's take this as an example. I feel like this might not be completely true, but I think sending people to Mars is probably an apolitical position for now. That could change, but for now, let's just say we got this nice little planet, Mars. And you know, a good thing will probably be putting the American flag here, you know? Now, this is all good until Kamala Harris says this is a good idea. You know, if Kamala Harris says this is a good idea, that's a good thing. I mean, the Democrats will probably be on board with this. They're the party that's most likely to say, oh, we shouldn't focus on exploring space and setting up colonies. There's too many problems that these tax dollars need on Earth. While I think both parties agree with that a majority of the time, it's definitely more common in the Republican space. But I bet big dollars that if this exact thing happened, Republicans are instantly going to start finding reasons why going to Mars is not in the human interest. Because guess what? If there's a bill sponsored by Kamala to make us go to Mars, that's gonna be a win for Kamala. And then that's giving legitimacy to the Kamala Harris government. Republicans don't want that. And I think it's pretty safe to say that our politicians want to stay in their jobs more than go towards the ideology, at least the majority of them. And now this applies to presidents, but not really Congress, because Americans just don't really care what Congress is doing, really. I mean, I live in New York, and I think there's a 98% chance Kamala Harris is gonna win this state, and yet there's way more New Yorkers that care about this presidential race than any state Senate race that we have, or any Congress race we have, even when that's a race where the voter can actually have an impact. Right now, our state is projected to go 18 percentage points towards Kamala Harris. But people really love presidents, and they really get emotional over presidents. So when a president says something, that's a problem. When Congress says something, who cares? And so my idea here is, Kamala Harris, no, we're just gonna erase you. No, instead, Kamala Harris is just not gonna voice an opinion on these things. I think it's probably a better idea to just maybe do some backroom deals if you still wanna engage in policy. This might be a rosy way to view things because Americans really care about the policy positions of their presidents, but I think a president that focuses more on, like, I don't know, foreign policy, where they have the most power anyways, and less about politics, could definitely decrease the amount of polarization and partisanship in today's culture. Next is just to have a president sweep across the country, winning like every single state. We have an example of this from the recent times when Ronald Reagan won every single state except for like Michigan up here. But other than that, he won California, Texas, Florida, New York, Hawaii, Wyoming, all in the same election. And you know, politicians gotta be a lot more careful with what policies they vote for if their own district voted for someone of the other party. Like any Democratic districts in like this whole area need to be wary that they're not gonna be so against everything Republicans and what Ronald Reagan's going for, because a majority of people in their district voted for the man. This is one of the reasons I like Vivek Ramaswamy so much. I think he definitely has some problems. I don't like that on his 10 Truths, he says that fossil fuels are necessary for human flourishing that much. I think that's a little, I don't like the wording there. I think perhaps it could be true, but it's definitely, I don't vibe with it completely. I do love his mindset here, because his mindset is not that, you know, I'm a Republican, so I'm not gonna go to Chicago and I'm not gonna go to Wyoming. Because if I go to Chicago, I'm basically wasting my time because most people are not gonna vote for me. And if I go to Wyoming, I'm gonna waste my time because everyone there is gonna vote for me. Instead, he goes to these places and talks to people. He is trying to win a Reagan-style landslide. That's what he said multiple times. And that's where you can really bridge that divide of Americans and really get that unity. When you try to speak to the whole country instead of just the 7 battleground states. Sad thing about this election is that we don't have any presidents doing that right now. Both Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, the running mates, they don't have any intention of doing this. They're just gonna do the old classic way and hope that this 50-50 coin toss goes in their way. And I was watching a whole video on American political history and how this era of politics, where every election is a toss-up, is really new in American history. We're from like 1865 to like 1830, or from after the Civil War to like FDR, Republicans won every single election except Woodrow Wilson's and maybe a few others. And then from like 1930 to 1980, it was basically Democrats winning everything except for a few Republican presidents who shared a lot in common with their Democratic peers. Basically, the election wasn't that competitive. We already knew who was most likely going to win. Also, thanks Theodore Roosevelt for letting a liberal racist run the country during World War I. And during the 1930 to 1980 timeframe, Republicans were constantly called out for having a minority party mindset. Basically, they viewed themselves as a minority party, and so instead of just challenging the Democrats on everything so that the government was inefficient and unproductive, so that they could have a case for winning the next election, they would negotiate with the Democrats, they would have talks with the Democrats, they would try to bridge together and make compromises. No, Republicans, that's not how this works. And so after Reagan, they stopped believing they were a minority party because they won the entire country. And so nowadays, you've got two parties who believe that they can be the majority party every single election and are right. And so it's within their self-interest to crush any hopes and dreams of any legislation going through in hopes that they'll win the next election. But during Reagan's time, Democrats had to be held accountable because their voters in their district voted for the opposite party. The last thing here is that maybe the Democrats and Republicans could agree as two organizations on something to work together and some shared goals. I mean, I do laugh because, it is possible. There's some things that are probably not too political that they could right now say that the Republicans and the Democrats agree on this going forward. And that would bring less stress to these issues. But that's maybe like 5 or 10% of issues. So this would be nice to kind of just show the unity between Americans, but it's unlikely that Democrats and Republicans could create a shared view of most things. And so after all this, that's why I've just been telling a lot of people I've been talking to just, not get too involved with this election cycle. Because while the presidents do have major disagreements and many different policies, neither of them have the type of charisma it takes to win the nation over and lead to long-lasting changes like FDR and Reagan, whose changes can still be felt to this day. This can be seen in the economic and social theory of the US, which I'll just lay on screen here. So, I recorded this video maybe like 2 weeks ago, and I did 100% agree with this then. However, I have been definitely swayed to a different opinion after watching videos from both JJ McCullough and the Legal Eagle about how this election may go deeper than policies. And so I would say that you maybe should care about this election, and a lot of my hands in the air, whatever attitude comes from me living in New York, which means that the election means nothing to me. But if you're in a swing state, you should definitely look into whether or not you think Trump is dangerous for democracy and the Constitution and the rule of law. Because they've made good arguments for me, and I'll put their videos in the description below. I would definitely check them out, because it definitely made me not so much support Kamala Harris, but not support Donald Trump. Alright, let's finish up this video. Changing on such a society-wide level is gonna be very difficult. So why not start out on something you have complete control over? The individual level. Check out my video right here, where I explain how we still act like we're part of tribes, how that's damaging us, and how you can leave your tribes and live a free-thinking, more individual life. While you're down there, hit the subscribe button to stay alerted with awesome, entertaining, and educational videos. And don't forget to win a landslide, stop talking about policies, presidents, and think better. I'll catch you over in this video right here.